We often grow up believing that danger always comes from outside, that the threats are out there, the rival nations, the competing powers, the enemies on the border. But the truth is far deeper. The greatest danger is not across the fence, not across the ocean, not even across the battlefield. The greatest danger lives within the silent whisper of fear that paralyzes nations before the first shot is ever fired. Think about it. Borders are lines drawn on maps, but fear is a line drawn in the mind. It dictates how nations speak, how leaders act, and how people believe. When fear takes the driver's seat, power is surrendered long before the opponent even steps forward. History has shown us that empires don't collapse because their enemies were stronger. They collapse because they allowed fear to erode their will from within. Now imagine a nation that refuses to be governed by fear. A nation that doesn't look across its borders with trembling, but with unshakable certainty. That mindset changes everything. It redefines how diplomacy is conducted, how defense is prepared, and how the world perceives that nation. Fear weakens alliances. Confidence builds them. Fear makes you react. Confidence allows you to lead. The question isn't whether threats exist. They always will. The real question is, who holds the pen to write the story of response? Is it the trembling hand of fear or the steady hand of courage? Every time a nation chooses courage, it robs its enemies of power. Enemies thrive when you feed them with your fear. But when you stand grounded, when you radiate certainty, suddenly the opponent loses their weapon. This principle doesn't just apply to nations. It applies to us as people. Fear is the chain that keeps us bound to hesitation, while courage is the key that unlocks our potential. You don't defeat fear by pretending it doesn't exist. You defeat fear by facing it, by stepping forward while your knees shake, by refusing to let it dictate the terms of your life or your future. So when you see a country that stands tall, that refuses to be dictated by fear, what you're really witnessing is not just strength of armies. It's strength of spirit. And that is a strength no missile, no border, no enemy can ever conquer. History has always shown us something fascinating. The most powerful armies, the most advanced weapons, the tallest walls, and the deepest treasuries have all failed when the mindset behind them was weak. Power has never been about how much you hold in your hands. It has always been about how much strength you carry in your mind and in your heart. You can hand a person the most advanced technology in the world, but if they don't believe in their ability to use it with certainty, it becomes nothing more than metal and wires. On the other hand, a nation with fewer resources but with unshakable belief in itself becomes unstoppable. That's the difference between possession and perception. Possession is external. It can be taken, it can be destroyed, it can be lost. But perception lives within. It shapes how others see you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. Think about the moments in history when underdogs stood up against giants. They didn't win because they had the bigger weapon. They won because they had the bigger belief. The world didn't respect them for what they own. It respected them for how they carried themselves. That confidence transformed their limited resources into limitless strength. The same principle applies to nations today. You can spend billions on defense, but if you project hesitation, the world will see weakness. You can control vast economies, but if you negotiate from a place of doubt, the world will see vulnerability. On the other side, a nation that stands with confidence, that speaks with certainty, that moves with clarity, creates an aura of untouchable strength, even if their arsenal is smaller. It's not the possession of power that keeps enemies at bay, it's the perception of power. When others believe you are unshakable, when they feel your confidence radiating, they hesitate, they recalculate, they hold back. That's the invisible shield stronger than any weapon system, stronger than any financial reserve. And it's not just about geopolitics. Look at your own life. Have you ever noticed how people respond to you differently when you walk with certainty, when you speak with conviction, When you stand tall even in uncertainty, that's the same law at work. People aren't responding to what you have. They're responding to how you carry it. True power isn't stored in vaults or barracks. It's embedded in identity, in confidence, in perception. And once a nation or an individual masters that, they don't just hold power, they become it. There comes a moment when every great nation must look into the mirror and ask itself a hard question. Who are we really? Not who we were in the past, not what we claim on the world stage, but who we are right now, when challenged, when pressured, when tested. That reflection can be the most powerful truth a country ever faces. It's easy to call yourself a superpower. It's easy to flex military strength, parade technology, and measure influence in numbers and charts. But none of that matters if the reflection in the mirror shows hesitation, confusion, or fear. Because when a nation doubts itself, the world can see it. And when the world sees doubt, respect begins to fade. Now consider nations that carry scars of history, nations that have faced wars, invasions, and division. Yet, when they stand before the mirror, they see resilience staring back at them. That reflection becomes their greatest weapon. It says, we may be challenged, but we will not break. And in that moment, they earn something no amount of firepower can buy: legitimacy, respect, and influence. So, what does this mean for those who claim to lead the world? If a nation like India, with its history of colonial wounds and decades of conflict, can stand tall and unafraid, then what excuse does a superpower with the largest arsenal and deepest resources have? The mirror doesn't lie. It doesn't care about the size of your budget or the sophistication of your weapons. It reveals your essence, strength, or insecurity. Every empire in history eventually faced this test. Rome, Britain, the Soviet Union, all looked into the mirror at the peak of their dominance. Some saw clarity and adapted, others saw denial and collapsed. The difference wasn't the size of their armies. It was the courage to face their reflection honestly. The same principle applies beyond geopolitics. Every individual faces their own mirror test. You can wear success like armor, you can project status and wealth, but when you look yourself in the eye, the truth surfaces. Are you leading your life with conviction, or are you hiding behind appearances? That moment defines everything, because the world will ultimately respond not to your possessions, but to your authenticity. A superpower is not defined by what others say about it. It is defined by what it sees in itself when the mirror is placed before it. And the nations that dare to confront that truth without flinching are the ones that lead history, not follow it. The most powerful stories in history were not written by chance. They were written by choice. Every nation, every leader, every individual faces the same crossroads. Either allow others to dictate your story, or summon the courage to define it yourself. And make no mistake, if you don't take control of your narrative, someone else will, and they will write it in ways that diminish you. Look at the world stage. Nations that hesitate, that allow fear or external pressure to shape their image, end up trapped in a story that isn't theirs. They become characters in someone else's script, reacting instead of leading, defending instead of directing. But the ones that rise, the ones that carve their place in history, are those who stand firm and say, "This is who we are. This is where we are going, and no one else gets to decide that." That takes courage, because it's far easier to play the victim of circumstance than the author of destiny. But destiny bows only to those who claim the pen. When a country chooses to write its own narrative, it no longer fears being defined by enemies, rivals, or critics. It stops reacting to threats and starts setting the tone. That shift, from defense to direction, is what transforms nations from ordinary players into global leaders. The same is true in personal life. Think of how often people allow labels, judgments, or failures to define them. They carry the weight of other people's stories until they forget they have the power to create their own. But the moment someone says, "No more. This is my story, my identity, my future," everything changes. They stop being prisoners of perception and start becoming architects of reality. Leadership, whether personal or national, is not about avoiding storms. It's about sailing through them with your own compass. It's about refusing to let critics decide your direction or rivals dictate your limits. Because when you write your own narrative, you send a signal to the world. We will not be moved by fear, we will not be silenced by doubt, and we will not surrender the authorship of our destiny. And that is the highest form of power, not merely having resources or influence, but possessing the courage to decide who you are and what story you will leave behind. For in the end, history doesn't remember those who reacted. It remembers those who dared to define themselves. There is a simple truth about human nature and about nations. People sense the energy you project before they hear the words you speak. When fear drives decisions, it radiates weakness, and weakness attracts aggression. But when confidence fuels your actions, it commands respect long before a single step is taken. Fear whispers uncertainty. It signals doubt. It creates an invitation for rivals to push, to test, to challenge. A fearful nation, like a fearful individual, becomes a magnet for opposition. Every hesitation is read as opportunity, every retreat as vulnerability. History is filled with examples where fear opened the door for conflict more effectively than any weapon ever did. Now contrast that with the power of confidence. When a nation stands tall, speaks with clarity, and acts with conviction, it alters the entire equation. Confidence isn't arrogance. It's the calm certainty that you know who you are and where you're going. Rivals sense it, allies trust it, and the world adjusts to it. Respect is not demanded. It is earned through presence. Think about the great leaders who changed the course of history. They didn't inspire followers because they had the biggest armies or the most advanced technology. They inspired because they exuded certainty in the face of chaos. That certainty became contagious. It spread to their people, their allies, and even disarmed their enemies. The same law governs our personal lives. Walk into a room with fear, and people pick up on it immediately. They doubt you before you even speak. But walk into that same room with confidence, with the energy of someone who knows their worth, and suddenly, the atmosphere shifts. People listen differently. They treat you differently. They respect what you bring, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Nations are no different. Those that lead from fear create more enemies, because fear breeds reaction, overcorrection, and weakness. But those that lead from confidence generate respect, because confidence inspires trust, stability, and vision. And in a world filled with uncertainty, that kind of stability is priceless. So, the question is never whether threats exist. They always will. The real question is this: will you let fear invite conflict, or will you let confidence create respect? That choice determines not only how others see you, but how history remembers you. And the ones who choose confidence don't just survive, they lead. The energy you project to the world defines how the world responds to you. When leaders, nations, or even individuals operate from a place of fear, that fear becomes a signal. It tells rivals, here is a weakness, here is an opening, here is a chance to press harder. Fear doesn't just live inside. It leaks out, it shapes decisions, and it becomes an invitation for conflict. History is clear on this. Empires that crumbled often didn't fall because of overwhelming external enemies. They fell because fear dictated their choices. Fear made them overreact, retreat when they should have stood firm, or lash out without clarity. And every time they acted from fear, they created more threats, more challenges, and ultimately, their own undoing. But when you flip the equation, something powerful happens. Confidence changes the entire game. It doesn't eliminate threats, but it changes how threats perceive you. A confident stance communicates strength without shouting. It radiates certainty, and that certainty makes others pause. Rivals hesitate to provoke. Allies feel secure to align. The atmosphere shifts from instability to respect. This is why true leadership is never just about resources or weapons or wealth. It's about the energy behind them. Confidence gives value to what you hold. Without it, even the greatest arsenal looks hollow. With it, even limited resources become magnified into something greater than they appear. And the same truth applies to you and me. Walk into a room full of strangers with fear in your posture, in your voice, in your eyes, and you'll be dismissed before you ever speak. Walk into that same room with confidence, and people will lean in, pay attention, and give weight to your presence. Confidence doesn't beg for respect. It commands it naturally. The world responds to what you believe about yourself. If you see yourself as vulnerable, others will treat you that way. If you see yourself as unshakable, others will recognize it instantly. This is not arrogance, it's alignment. It's the power of carrying yourself with conviction and refusing to let fear dictate your story. Nations and people alike face the same choice. Allow fear to multiply enemies, or choose confidence and generate respect. One path creates conflict, the other builds stability. And history has always honored those who stood with certainty, who projected strength not just through possession, but through presence. Every great turning point in history was marked not by comfort, but by crisis. Not by ease, but by pressure. And in those moments, nations and individuals alike faced a choice: to hesitate, to compromise, to doubt, or to stand firm with absolute conviction. The difference between those who lead and those who are forgotten is the strength of their resolve. Resolve is not a word, it is not a slogan, it is a force. It is the decision to hold your ground when everything around you demands retreat. It is the refusal to let fear, uncertainty, or opposition dictate your path. Resolve is the moment when courage becomes unshakable, when identity becomes undeniable, and when action becomes unstoppable. Think of the movements that reshaped humanity. They were not powered by sheer numbers or limitless resources. They were powered by people and nations who said, "We will not back down." That energy becomes bigger than armies, bigger than borders, bigger than doubt itself. The world bends to the will of those who refuse to break. But here's the truth: resolve is tested in silence, not in spectacle. It's tested in the quiet moments where leaders sit with impossible decisions. It's tested in the individual who feels fear but moves forward anyway. It's tested when the easier path screams for attention, and yet the harder, truer path is chosen instead. For a nation, resolve defines legacy. Allies rally around it. Enemies think twice before crossing it. The world takes notice when a country doesn't just speak strength, but lives it through unwavering commitment. That is how influence is built, not overnight, not with a single speech, but with consistent, unshakable resolve that never wavers regardless of the storm. For a person, it is the same. Your life will not be remembered by how much you avoided hardship, but by how you faced it. Did you stand tall when the world tried to push you down? Did you hold your vision when others doubted it? Did you keep moving when every obstacle tried to stop you? That is what defines you. In the end, resolve is not about being fearless. It is about refusing to surrender. It is about deciding once and for all that no matter the challenge, you will remain unshaken, unmoved, unstoppable. And when that level of conviction is reached, nothing, not enemies, not setbacks, not even time itself, can erase the mark you leave on this world.